Hello all and welcome to a sort of retrospective slash update video. So yeah, this is kind of like the second sort of news video that I've done. This one is probably going to be a little bit easier for me to do than the previous one for obvious reasons. And this is one I discussed a while back, but I decided to kind of let it roll forward for a little bit to see what sort of developments have been happening. And what does this have to do with? Well, as you can see, this is the 2022 Anchor Holiday Ale. All technically, it's our special ale. I believe is the name that it actually goes by. And yeah, so I have. This is one of 10 that I have saved up in my refrigerator from 2022. And I'm going to go and crack one of these 10 beers open. Um, just, so I can have something to drink while I sort of discuss this. This is 7.2 ABV. Of course, it is a winter warmer. It's probably, I don't have like the production date on this, but they usually make it sometime in September or November. So it's around a year old. It's been aging a year. So as you know, some of the hop essences have gone away, leaving more of the malts to kind of hold the show there, as it were, with this beer. And while I would like for it to have been Anchor Steam, uh, I don't have any of that. My dad has one can, which we are probably going to split sometime in a few months because it's fairly light ABV. It's not going to keep for years and years and years. So, you know, at some point we're going to go and split that last can of Anchor Steam. But I have this, and he's not too big of a fan of the special holiday ale. So yeah, this is all mine, I suppose. And being at 7.2, I can probably store it for at least maybe about 2 or 3 years. You know, more than 3 years is probably pushing it. So, anyways, let's go and see here. This is what I get. Okay, there we go. So why don't we read the label sure first, even though I reviewed this already. This is the 48th from our brewers at Anchor. This ale, made with natural flavors, features a new recipe and tree every year. But the intent with which we offer it is the same: joy and celebration of the newness of life. Trees symbolize the winter solstice when the earth and its seasons appears born anew. Mary Ellen Pleasant planted blue gum trees in front of her San Francisco home in the 1800s. This home is long gone, but her landmark trees remain, a living tribute to the mother of civil rights in California. Of course, classic bottle art. So let's go and open this up. And I'm going to be referring to some news articles online, obviously, because I can't remember everything. Oh my, interesting. There's already a foam at the top here. So I'm going to venture it's about the same color as it was before. Sort of a dark tea color with a beige head. For some reason, the mix of spices in this one kind of had like a slight note of eucalyptus when I originally tried it. Now it's a little bit stronger. It's kind of interesting. Or maybe it's supposed to evoke the blue gum tree. I don't know what a gum tree smells like, but it kind of smells like an Australian tree. Slightly camphoritic. Onto the palate. Oh, yeah, sort of herbaceous carob notes too. Onto the palate. That's where we see how much it's changed there. So not very carbonated. Kind of wonder if there was like a slow leak in this. That's why, there was a foam cap when I popped it open. So it hasn't been shaking or anything. It's not flat by any means. But it is kind of, it's not as carbonated as when I opened the bottle fresh. Sort of spicy, woody notes. Also, bittersweet chocolate. Is somewhat evocative of aromatic woods. I want to say cedar, but it's not really close to cedar. It's like another kind of box you open up in the wood smells, in a pleasant fashion. And there's still a hop bitterness there. Um, Kind of just rises in the mids and continues in the finish. There's not much of a development pattern. It's just sort of bitterness. And the more aromatic parts of that hoppiness is kind of evaporated off, or aged off, I should say. All in all, still nicely complex. Okay, so this isn't really a review per se. Probably going to do a more serious one come Christmas time, New Year's, review it then. Anyways, so as you know, a couple months ago, a little under 2 months ago, thereabouts, Sapporo, USA, the American branch of Sapporo Brewing Company in Japan, announced that they were closing Anchor Brewing, which they had bought out several years before. Now, many of the workers there knew that something was up, but nobody could really guess. Some thought it might be another brewery was buying out. Some people thought they were going to close. Some people thought it was going to be like some sort of rebranding, you know? And it ended up being pretty much the worst possible one. They're closing the brewery. They're not going to try to sell it as a single unit. Basically, the materials, the trademarks, the recipes, those will basically go up for sale piecemeal. So it's basically breaking apart Anchor Brewing, which is, sort of, it is, you know, one of the anchors of the American craft beer scene. In that, when Fritz Maytag bought it in 1965, as a failing local brewery in San Francisco and revitalized it into a high quality craft beer enterprise. It's basically been one of the foundations of the craft beer movement here in America. The rediscovery of traditional styles and traditional brewing techniques, you know, that had been lost after the prohibition of the 1920s. Well, not really lost, but not really practiced anymore in a commercial way. And so when it was announced, and it seems much from interviews and investigative reporting, it sort of intimated that even much of the in-house management of Anchor Brewing did not know that they were being, that the company was closing until the day it was announced. And so, for many people like me, it kind of feels like a dick move on Sapporo's part. And I don't know if it was Japanese management or USA management that just totally mishandled this closing, mishandled the union, the union negotiations, mishandled the unionization period, mishandled the branding, mishandled. It's like they purchased it, then they didn't realize what they were buying. So Sapporo also more recently purchased some Canadian brewers and also Stone Brewing Company. And Stone Brewing Company has much larger brewing facilities, being that they are not in the San Francisco urban area. I believe they're in San Diego and other places. So their breweries have been expanded so they can brew, Sapporo's lagers, basically what they sell in America. It's not really imported over from Asia, it's brewed in America. And it kind of begs, oh, I shouldn't say beg the question, that's not the proper way to use it, but it kind of makes one think, why did they buy Anchor when they knew, any sort of due diligence would have found that Anchor had kind of maxed out its production potential at the point that it was purchased, and it really did not have the complete facilities to go and brew a large amount of an adjunct lager as well as its core line. So really, from starting to finish, Sapporo kind of didn't understand what they were doing with Anchor, didn't understand what they had with Anchor, and basically, in the end, sort of kind of basically screwed the workers at Anchor, as well as all of us fans of Anchor Brewing. But I think that if Anchor is what's paying your rent, I think that's a bit more important than those of us who just drink it for the pleasure of it. Um, and so this kind of caused like a big backlash, as well as concern within the craft beer community, as many people fondly remember Anchor beers as one of their entrees into the craft beer world. That said, almost all of them went and prefaced it with, I don't drink it anymore, or I can't really find it anymore. So, kind of goes into like the issues that they were having with promotion and distribution as well. And I know that firsthand because for a while, distribution to Hawaii stopped for all Anchor beers. It kind of reappeared with just steam and the winter ale. And basically, basically, it became, this thing where everybody's sort of bemoaning the fate of the brewery, but they weren't really buying Anchor beers all that heavily. And I'm sort of guilty of this to a certain extent. I wanted to buy it many times, but it just wasn't available. Anchor Steam being one of my standbys, the beers the beer that I drink when I'm not making reviews, let's put it that way. So in the days and weeks following, you know, it they figured out like the timeline of when they were going to close operations, when they were going to cease distribution. So basically, the baseball park in San Francisco, because of like the contract, will have beer up until a certain point. So that kind of kept the brewery open just for to fulfill that contract there. Um, it's only for a few months though. But for the rest of us, we are basically all out. You're not going to find it on shelves. People have FOMO bought everything. FOMO, fear of missing out. So now that it's closed, everyone just went and wiped out the shelves of the stuff. And it kind of becomes, what am I doing here? It kind of becomes, a thing where some other craft brewers look into purchasing it. They sort of realize a lot of the problems that Sapporo had, kind of like, they would have as well, including the union negotiations. So Anchor Brewing is a union shop, and that would be more difficult for a small business to kind of take on than a large corporation, as well as finding financing in this age of increased interest rates and contraction within the craft beer industry. There's no free money to go and fly around anymore into the air. And so the most recent news, and this is within the last week or so, is that slowly but surely the Anchor Union Association, so basically the unionized workers of Anchor, which is basically everyone who worked on the line in brewing, fermenting, packaging, all that kind of stuff, kind of sans like the white collar workers. So I believe marketing, management, all that stuff, accounting was not unionized. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe, yeah, there was that divide. But the union, which is affiliated with the International Longshore Workers Union, is attempting to create Anchor as a co-op. Now, what does that mean? Honestly, I've read a couple interviews that are done over the past week or so, and it's kind of nebulous to say the least. So they're saying that they've secured some funding. Um, and due to the fact that there isn't a huge amount of interest right now in by other corporations in buying up the divvied up parts of Anchor Brewing, um, it seems like they have the best shot because they're the ones most invested in keeping the place open and running. So they're attempting to go and reopen, purchase the intellectual properties and space and run it as a co-op. And so just recently, there was a beer that was, a California Common, as should be, called Solidarity Ale, from the Anchor Workers collaboration with the Foxtail Fermentation Project. I don't know what the Foxtail Fermentation Project is, but basically all proceeds from this go to help them create co-op and purchase the intellectual property and brewing space, which is going to be well. It's going to be expensive, but probably less expensive than usual for San Francisco, given San Francisco's current property woes. Huh. So there's a bit of precipitate that's hanging in here. Didn't notice that before. It's not particularly chunky though, just mildly so. And so what it boils down to is, do I think they're going to be successful? I hope they're successful. Um, but still, they have to raise several $1 million, probably in the neighborhood of around $10 to $20 million. So that's it's kind of a hard, it's going to be a real uphill battle, to say the least. Granted, I think that's if they purchase everything. So like physical properties and the plant and all that stuff and all the equipment is probably the most cost there. They might be able to issue some of the intellectual properties, but then you know um, it's all very odd and legally weird to me. And they mention it being kind of legally weird on their end too. So yeah, that's where it's at right now. They're in the process of raising funds to purchase everything and operate as a co-op. And it seems like most of the other for-profit ventures, um, they've kind of decided to stand back. Though several other craft brewers are lending their support, obviously. Um, let's see here. What's the name of the one that's helping them with this? Enterprise Brewing is helping them with this Solidarity Ale, and I've seen in the news other brewers mentioned as well. So yeah, that's where it is right now. I do hope that they are indeed successful in this endeavor. And you know, hopefully by 2024, I'll be able to toast with our special ale, no matter who owns it. But I'm hoping it's still brewed in San Francisco by the same workers who obviously do feel very, very passionate about their brewery and the beers that they brew. So I am wishing them all the best in this battle. And I am really hoping that Sapporo does the right thing, and knowing that people and the craft beer community, workers at Anchor Brewing, want to go and keep Anchor Brewing as a single unit, will attempt and do their best to kind of facilitate that process instead of, just shattering it and selling it piecemeal. I mean, you know, I'm willing to forgive them if they help facilitate that process rather than being like, nope, it's going to take too long. To the highest bidder it goes. Here's the recipes. Here's the brewing equipment. That kind of thing. And that, folks, is your sort of beer retrospective discussion for this evening. Cheers.